Right, madam, come on in. Where's y'all traveling from today? Come down 321 or 77?
I reached the border and took the back road, thought it would be easier. So
Oh, yeah. You got your PowerPoint on the desk?
I do.
Let me put that in. You'll be right here. Yeah. Now, this thing will stall from time to time, and I hopefully will be paying attention,
Okay, I will.
and I will restart it. I have to use this. It's just aggravating, but it works.
Put it on 2 separate jump drives.
Alright. Now, what we have to do is we have to take that disc out. It's a long story. Yeah. Again, we should be recording. We are.
No, okay, yes.
And it will move forward and backwards, and when it hangs, and it will, I'll unhang it. See, I've got the menu down here at the bottom, and I can unhang it, then it'll continue to work for it. It's just aggravating.
The words did not come up. Ah, okay, cool.
Good morning, Dr. Jones.
You're cold or hot in here.
Okay. Well, I don't have a key. I never did have a key. They changed the lock and my key doesn't fit in. Somebody broke one off or something. I should have stole his. He turned his in. I should have just traded mine out for his. Nobody would ever know.
Let him turn it in.
Yeah, should have sent mine back in. Dr. Bull found us a key this one last week. We had to call security. And when we opened the door, it was 35 degrees.
It ain't me.
So I've got that on and I went and got my heater. I've got it on. So we've got it up to about 60 now. So yeah, we could unlink this one in here. Is your strategic partner going to join on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like me to call him?
No, it's still 10 till. Still that time. I like to get started a little. Good.
I might just, Dr. Jones, that's my husband, Warren. Okay, nice to meet you. Good day. Sure. I'm coming. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you guys live in one, did you got this morning? It takes about, what, 2 hours and 15 hours. I do, I just live like 5 minutes from here. Literally, I was doing some work and I was a little bit later than I meant to be, and but I was, time just got away from me just, but luckily I'm only 5 minutes. Yeah, it's about an hour actually from here, well, with construction, there. And that's everywhere. That's everywhere, that's everywhere. The interstate that goes up toward Asheville. It's quick to get there, get to the interstate, but then, and then you would think, you know, it would be fine, but they're doing so. It takes and it's a beautiful drive, so now, so. This is easy, right, just straightforward, yeah. I think, you know, the campus, so. Is that's something, isn't it? For it to be. Well, you know, just because we're always at the satellite in Charlotte, so. It's a beautiful campus. I like to walk outside and I come over here and walk. It's a really pretty. Yeah, I see they're doing a lot of construction. always like to, as I walk around, you know, the kids, I call them kids, young people. Hanging out and going to class and doing their thing. It's always, you know, it always lifts my spirits to come walk around campus. I do not like cold weather, and it's not my thing. Yesterday, and that wind. It kept coming on my car. Yeah. And I do not like that because I love to get outside and I love to work in my yard and I love to be near the water and I love anything outside. And so winter time, I don't think I get that seasonal affective disorder, but I do get. I did.
Time change.
You know.
So as a counselor, one of the things that they were talking about, was, you know, of course, how it might be beneficial for them not to change the time, because when it does get dark earlier, that brings about, you know, because the season change, it gets darker early, people are more sluggish, tired, depression.
Dr. Lamb, we're doing this again.
Well, the rest of two scheduled at the same time.
Okay.
What time?
11.
Yeah, 11. Well, it won't be done by 11:30. Let's go find you 11:30. I don't know. Who is that? Can you do it?
I am.
Hey, hey, what's your name?
Charrisse.
Charrisse. Okay. Thank you.
Hey,
You what we doing?
Huh?
You what we doing?
no, huh? I'm shopping.
Shut.
All right. Lisa, if you will introduce your partner, we'll get started. Of course, I left mine.
Look, you know, that's a shame when I don't recognize the telephone. I think. Dr. Fleming.
Yes,
Dr. Fleming, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm in Spartanburg in a parking lot on the way to a funeral in Atlanta.
No worries, no worries. Thank you for joining me. So Dr. Fleming, this is Dr. Lamb and Dr. Jones. And so they have helped me get to this juncture, and you guys, that is Dr. Fleming. He's our, he was my consultancy partner with Agape Christian Retreat Center.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. One more time.
Is yours still working?
I hear you now.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Do this one from the beginning. All right, make sure it's advancing. I'll get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. This is the final dissertation defense for Charrisse. She's here today to share her final presentation and slideshow with us. So without further ado, Charrisse, go right ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My esteemed committee for sure. Thank you guys for being here. My name is Charrisse, and I am on this journey seeking a doctorate of education from Gardner-Webb in organizational leadership. And so with further ado, I would like to present to you the strategic planning process, a mixed method examination of the process as an antidote to promote sustainability and prevent the extinction of nonprofits. So Agape Christian Retreat Center was an organization that was a nonprofit, and it was formed for the specific purpose of working with church leadership in terms of addressing counseling as an issue, leadership, as well as providing them with rest and renewal. what we found is that in my research, Jackson indicated in 2010 that in 1 month, 1,800 pastors left the profession. And so because they left the profession, that kind of spawned additional research. So additional research came from the Barna Group. And the Barna Group is a religious organization that totally works with religious organizations trying to obtain information to improve services. So the Barna Group actually delivered a survey, and they did it on 3 different occasions. They did it in 2015, 2020, and then again in 2022. And what they found was 3 identifying things. They found that the primary problems that pastors experience was burnout. So burnout, identified by the World Health Organization, they indicate that it is a situation where it's an occupational hazard, and an occupational hazard that has a taxonomy number. And so when you have a taxonomy number, that just simply indicates that it is a disease. And so they track it in that way. So when we talk about whether or not we need to look at this in terms of how serious it is, and also in terms of the contribution in terms of my body of work to the process, it's important to know that what Agape is doing is timely and very important, and it's supported by the research, right? So with those 3 things being identified as pastors needing counseling, needing development with leadership, and also hoping that they were better prepared for the things that happened when they were counseling or whatever their membership needed. So this is the lovely facility where all of the good work will occur. I actually had the opportunity to visit, and what I will say is that this nonprofit is very important because in general, nonprofits are important. You know, according to research, they tell us that there are 15.1 nonprofits that exist, 12.5 people in terms of employment, in terms of those who are employed by nonprofits, and then also that $826 million are contributed in salary and benefits to those who work at nonprofits. The Bureau of Statistics tells us that with all of the nonprofits that I just talked about, a large amount of money, it's $1 trillion is actually provided to the economy in order to support the community as well as the economy. So in my research, we talked about the statement of the problem. So simply the problem is that Agape Christian Retreat Center is a form of organization, but it is not functioning, and it doesn't have the framework in order to operate. So when I looked at the analysis of the problem, we looked at lack of processes and procedures such as determining organizational readiness. There wasn't a strategic plan in place. We talked about, you know, the board was selected, but they required training and development. We looked at volunteer recruitment and retention, and then also data analysis for tracking assets and impact. The reason why, you know, when we analyze this problem is so important is because what we do know and what I have found in my research is not only for just nonprofits, but also for all businesses, more than 50% of businesses fail within the first 3 years of existence if they don't have a strategic plan. So when we talk about what I was researching, why I was researching it, came up with the hypothesis of can long-term planning in the form of strategic planning decrease nonprofit dissolution and increase long-term sustainability for startup nonprofits. So with that, I had questions. So how does an organization determine readiness and preparation for long-term planning? Just because organizations may want to seek to do strategic planning, are they ready for it? And do they have what it requires in order to execute that? when we talk about who are the key participants in the planning and facilitating of the long-term process, we know that people have to be prepared. They have to have the skills, the ability to actually execute. We want to know what knowledge and resources are needed to accomplish the long-term planning process, because we definitely have to know what are the skills that are needed. How do we implement that? We kind of look at all of the things that are necessary. And the reason why we have 10 years is because what we have found is that within 10 years, 30% of nonprofit organizations fail within 10 years if they don't have a long-term planning process in place. So the basis of my work was based on this theoretical framework. So a theoretical framework is what kind of guides my research. And for me, I just kind of consider it the roadmap to kind of get me to where I need to be. And so for me, I think in the process, I think the cool thing was that when I looked at this theoretical process of Lewin's change management, it aligned with strategic planning because they both started in the same place where they were assessing where the organization was, right? So when we talk about Lewin's change management theory, you know, it has 3 stages. They have the unfreeze, change, and the refreeze. So what I like about this is outside of it being really a simple process, it lays out what are the key elements that we need to think about and execute in order for us to have the optimal opportunity for us to succeed as an organization. So when we look at unfreeze, this is where the planning begins. And so, of course, we're talking about strategic planning. So a plan sets the basis for, it gives us the framework in which to work from. And so in this portion, we're talking about the readiness for change, right? So we want to educate the people that are involved. We want to make sure that they're informed about it. We want to make sure that there is a plan in terms of how we will proceed. And we want to appoint the appropriate people so that they can carry out the plan. You know, for me, one of the things that I thought was really important is that in this part, this is where we get everybody on board in terms of the buy-in, because that is the important part. Because if the organizational culture is not what it needs to be, it'll be very difficult to execute change. And what we know about change, according to research, is that people typically align with familiarity, and that change is, you know, difficult for most. So, you know, the unfreeze is a very important part of implementing what we need to do and making sure that we get started on a good track. So when we talk about the change, this is where we're kind of implementing. This is where we are providing the praise, the coaching, the training, and this is where we actually begin to lead, because we want to make sure that all of the things that we have identified that we want to change, that once we have everybody on board, that we're giving them the encouragement and the tools that they need to kind of follow through with the process, because we have to still remember, you know, we want to make sure that we're still working in a good work environment where it's healthy and people are buying into what we're doing. And then we want to make sure that in the last stage, refreeze, that it sticks, because that's the key. We don't want to start something and then have it flop. So in the refreeze, what we're doing is we're trying to anchor the changes and keep them in place. So what we have to do is kind of set the stage. You know, we want to monitor, we want to evaluate. We want to see what's working and what's not working. This is where we establish different kinds of systems, controls, where we're able to evaluate, because what we want to do is be able to determine if there is progress or if there's lack of progress. And if so, then we need to figure out what it is we need to do. But also in the refreeze, you know, we need to be able to celebrate the efforts that are being made in terms of what does that look like? Making sure that, again, we keep the morale of the organization high, because with change, you know, we address difficulty. So this is an example of the process. One of the things in research identified is that when we want to stay in alignment, we want to look at making sure that we're able to evaluate, because we live in a society where they want data to support what's important. And so With this, if you look, there's a line for unfreeze, the things that need to happen in terms of what is it that we're gonna do? It's gonna give us a time frame, who's going to be responsible, what resources we need in order to make sure that it's executed. And then we want to be able to identify if there is progress or lack of progress. And the system that I use for that is called SMART. And SMART is an acronym that is used in the business world when we identify it, when we're developing goals. We want to make sure that it's specific in nature, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, and then it's time oriented. So the great part is that in working with, Dr. Fleming in the Agape Christian Retreat Center, we recognized that burnout was prevalent. And to me, that made all the more reason why it was important that this facility exists, and that he was spot on when he identified the things that were needed in terms of how to help this specific community, because it was, again, formed, but it wasn't functioning because we're talking about the need for infrastructure. And so it required a strategic plan in order to provide direction on how they needed to move forward so that they could create the best or the optimal opportunity for them to be successful. According to the National Center for Charitable Statistics, it tells us that 30% of nonprofits fail within the first 10 years. And that's why it's so important that we get what we need in terms of strategic planning, because strategic planning is considered evidence-based and is considered best practices when we're talking about how to start a business. So I had the opportunity to do research, and I did it in form of two things. I did the research from the literature, and then I also collected data. And so from the solutions in terms of, how is an organization going to be successful, and can long-term planning help an organization to sustain itself for long-term, it identified that an organization needs to determine if they're ready for it. All organizations don't necessarily require a full-blown strategic plan, but they need to be able to have information in terms of where they are and where they're trying to get to. So when we talk about defining the roles in terms of human capital, human capital is our most important asset or resource when we talk about the organization. And so we need them to be able to create, execute, and evaluate the strategic plan. We also need to talk about how to design, recruit, and select the training and the duties for board members, as well as the executive director. And that is something, all of these solutions are definitely something that we need to assess ongoing. We will need to make sure that we know who has what skills and what knowledge and what knowledge we may need to attain. And then we also have to evaluate the organizational culture. There's a quote that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's simply because no matter how well we plan, if the temperament and the temperature of the organization is not right, it's going to be very difficult to implement any type of change or any process that will do something different from what those folks that are being affected know. Last thing, in terms of solutions for from the literature, it talks about developing a succession plan. A succession plan is simply another type of plan or roadmap. Cool thing is that a succession plan can be a standalone type of plan, or it can work in conjunction with the strategic plan. And so the succession plan tells us, in emergencies, or if somebody leaves the organization, who's going to fill in. And that's why it's so important when we talked about up at the top about the training and what's necessary. We want to make sure that we're able to kind of cross-train so that we can fill in the gaps. And I think, when I was working with Dr. Plum, that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about it. It's like, for me, it was like my research is filling in a gap, and what he's doing is filling in a gap in the community that is so needed. So when we talk about methodology, I use a mixed methodology, explanatory, and it kind of tells us the cause and consequence of a well-defined problem. I use surveys to do so. I use a system called Qualtrics. You know, we wanted to make sure that it was secure, and those that agreed to participate knew that their confidence was going to be protected. And so both methods were done online. And so my sample group, they took the survey. What I did was I issued it. I gave a window of 10 days for them to respond to it. And when they responded to it, then I analyzed the information that I received. So in doing the explanatory method, more specifically, I use a sequential explanatory design. And what that is simply that it's in sequence. So the first thing that I did was I issued the first survey, and know that when we talk about quantitative, we're talking about obtaining numerical numbers and how we, you know, because there's so much data, what we do is we look at the numbers, but then what we do is we use graphs to kind of help explain the findings of the numbers, okay? And so that is the first part of the sequential explanatory design, is issuing the quantitative survey. And so based on what or how the sample group responds, then questions are formulated in a qualitative method. And so with that, I use open-ended questions, because what that did was it allowed me to review what I received from the quantitative information, and then based on what that was, develop questions that would help me to further explain the things that were needed to know during this research process. So breaking down quantitative data, so I created a survey. It was called the Agape Strategic Planning Function Survey. It was 10 questions. And so again, I issued that through Qualtrics. And then based on the responses, what I did was I used a 4-point scale. So based from strongly disagree to agree. And so however the respondents felt related to the question, that's how they responded. And so from the response, what my findings were when I issued that information was that the folks that were identified as part of the advisory board had knowledge about strategic planning in terms of knowing what mission, vision, and those things, all of the key elements needed that they needed to know about strategic planning and how to implement it. When I issued the qualitative data, that was answering all the who, what, when, where, why questions. And remember, typically, you know, it was open-ended. So it allowed them to write as much as they needed to in terms of a response. And so we were able to collect that information. And so once the questions were formulated, this was the answer to our quantitative data in terms of furthering what else did we need. That is an example of the actual quantitative questionnaire that I used. And then what I did was I put the information into themes, because there were different things that came out when I got the research. And when I say different things, so remember, we're coming from two perspectives. We're coming from the perspective of what the literature or the research says, and then also what I collected from this very specific situation of Agape Christian Center. And so, you know, one of the things that was clear throughout the whole process is that finance was the primary reason why organizations fail. But what I assert to you is just simply that any business needs finances. And so for me, that just wasn't enough meat and potatoes to say this is why our organization fails, because money will always be needed for any organization to function. And so from my findings, I found that the board of directors had knowledge about the strategic planning process. Those limited in knowledge, they were willing to learn or be mentored so that they could get up to speed to do what needed to be done. the board member possess relevant skills in terms of the strategic planning process. You know, one thing that I thought was interesting that I found was that my first question on the qualitative was how many hours were you willing to contribute? And so half of the board had put like maybe 2 hours, different hours, but at least half of them were not meeting what the research indicated. So research just says that when you are a board member, you need to be able to contribute at least 8 to 10 hours to the board member, or 120 hours per month. Something along those lines. I mean, year, I'm sorry. So because of that, one thing that I would, you know, just recommend is that because these people were willing and they complied with all of the other things that were requested, like in the process, I feel like if we go back to looking at Lewin's model and kind of re-educating them on what the needs are and let them have a better idea, because they were just answering a question at that time, but it would seem that they already volunteered. So just making sure or clarifying, you know, do they have the time to do it? Because that will also help Agape to say, okay, well, maybe we may need to select another board member because they don't have the time to contribute that we need. Or perhaps they are willing to do it, just didn't know what the need was at the time. So I thought that that was very interesting. The executive leadership team was able and willing to do what was needed to move from a formed organization to a functioning organization. So earlier on in my presentation, I had those 4 questions. And so based on that, I was able to kind of glean what was present and what is needed. So for how does the organization determine organizational readiness in preparation for strategic planning? Well, Agape, what they had present, they had a willingness to do what was needed, and that was supported by the research that I did. They had executive leadership in place. They had intellectual capacity, and they also had internal stakeholders. What was needed was developing a mission and vision statement. Remember, with strategic planning, we need to know where we are and where we're going. And so having a mission and vision statement is critical for any organization. They needed financial resources, time capacity, policies, and definitely standard operating procedures. Well, we looked at question number 2, who are the key participants in the planning and facilitating of the long-term planning process? We have on board the board of directors, we have the executive leadership, and we have internal stakeholders. What is needed? Well, remember, human capital is the most important resource, you know, in any organization. So we need to make sure that we have professional and direct care staff that will be able to do it. Research indicates that most nonprofits are run by volunteers, so we definitely need to talk about how to recruit and retain volunteers. The other thing is that, you know, they have the internal stakeholders, but they need external stakeholders, because remember, it's about relationships and developing the things that are needed to work outside. So, you know, outside of that, in order to make money, we need clientele, and then we also need to have standard operating procedures for the key participants to execute. Question number 3, what knowledge, skills, and resources are needed to facilitate and execute the strategic plan? What Agape had was they had leadership, they had strategic planning experience, board experience, and they had internal stakeholders. What is needed? Financial resources, they need the standard operating procedures, they need policies, and they need a process for training, so that, remember, training is so important because it's going to be ongoing. Question 4, how can the implementation of strategic planning process reduce the number of nonprofits that fail within 10 years? The thing is that they had a willingness to do what was needed. They had executive leadership, intellectual capacity, and, you know, most important, they had a site location for where all of the good work is going to occur. What is needed? Development of infrastructure, financial resources, time capacity, policies, standard operating procedures, qualified staff and volunteers, a process for monitoring and evaluating systems, quality management, clientele, you know, staff, and we also want to talk about customer satisfaction. So with all of these findings, one of the things that I wanted to do is kind of just thread the needle in terms of understanding all of the things that I learned during this process. And so for the findings, we had an established executive director and a board. One of the cool things that I thought aligned with my research was that succession planning was a key element in terms of how to get it done. And Dr. Fleming had also created what he called a legacy board, where for future, his family would be able to continue what he had started. And so they understand, you know, kind of the mission and what the goal is for Agape. The board was willing to do what the nonprofit needed, and existing skills are beneficial for the nonprofit. And so those were my findings from my data. The findings from the literature indicated that good governance was needed, succession planning, a healthy work culture, and the role of human capital. Again, cannot stress enough the importance of the role of the people that are involved in that process. And so for me, based on what I found, what the literature said in terms of strategic planning, the nonprofit, they needed the strategic plan, but the evidence is that the findings aligned with the literature that was found. When I talk about the relationship between the theoretical framework and, you know, why I recommend the things that I want to recommend for this organization, again, you know, change is difficult, it's hard. And so the theoretical framework, we just have to remember that it is a process, and we have to, you know, we have the charge of making sure that at each level, in each stage, that we're addressing all of the things that need to occur. We want to make sure that we put emphasis on understanding where the agency or the Agape is, and we need to make sure that change happens in stages. And so for the recommendations overall, we're just talking about processes, making sure that the agency is ready, and then making sure that the culture is intact, because that can certainly derail the process. And so more specifically, when I look at recommendations, where we need to start is, you know, creating an organizational chart so we know who does what the position is, hierarchy, how we can use our volunteers, in what place they are within the organization. Certainly, you know, I've stressed training throughout, so definitely making sure that we board development, because at some time board members will leave, come back. We got to make sure that everybody is on the same playing field and that they align with what it is that Dr. Fleming is trying to do at Agape. We need to make sure that we have job descriptions, also paid employees, and doing the typical things in terms of paid employees, where we're reference checking, making sure that we have good employees that are capable of doing what needs to be done. And then, of course, you know, having performance appraisals to ensure that they are based on their job description. We want to make sure that volunteers, we're holding them, even though they're volunteering, we want to make sure that they are in alignment with what is happening and that they're valuing what we are putting out into the community. We want to make sure that the evaluation process is done as well. You know, one of the things with volunteers, I just thought about you know, there's a volunteer functions inventory that can be had, that can be used so that information can be gleaned. Because, you know, one of the things is that, you know, where the organization is, can't stress that enough, because time changes it. People leave organizations. So we always want to make sure that we're constantly training and assessing our situation. At the end of the day, we need to be able to measure it, to make sure that we're doing what we say we want to do and set out to do. And of course, it aligns with our mission and our vision. And so we want to make sure that we have professional development. We want to have continuous quality improvement, and we want to make sure that we have long-term goals so we always know that we're moving in a forward direction. In terms of deliverables, just talking about the strategic plan itself. That is the business practice and the strategy. And so when we talk about the objectives, what it looks like, making sure that the organization has a vision, mission, and that the values are clear. And then, of course, when we're analyzing, we have some standard tools where we use a SWOT analysis, for example, where we're looking at what's happening in terms of the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that might be present for the organization. And, one thing is that I will say is that research indicated that you should use both a SWOT and a PESTLE, because a PESTLE not only evaluates the internal stakeholders and what's going on internal, but PESTLE also includes what's going on with the external stakeholders as well. And so when we talk about formulating the strategy, we want to put a plan together. We have to make sure that we are gathering our resources in terms of what is needed to execute what it is that we're trying to do. We want to make sure that the strategic implementation, again, training, and then
Recording in progress.
we want to make sure that we allocate those resources. And then again, we want to evaluate. Evaluation is so critical because we want to make sure that what we're doing is in alignment with what we envision. And if not, then we have the ability to make corrections. And so when we talk about an action plan, what does that look like? Starting January, we want to go ahead and share the results of what we found. We want to make sure that there's a meeting time with the committee. We want to make sure that we establish more specific SMART goals in terms of identifying the risks, the barriers, the funding that are needed. I know for sure one of the things that Dr. Fleming talked to me about was aligning with the Chamber of Commerce in his community. And so, those things have started in terms of, making sure that we align with what the research dictates or suggests that we do. We want to establish monitoring processes. Definitely putting in KPIs, which are key performance indicators, because again, we want to make sure that we are evaluating all of the important elements to make sure that we're successful. Please know that, with strategic planning, there are no guarantees. But although there are no guarantees, what research is telling us is that this is a best practice method that will put you on the trajectory of being successful. And so at the end of the day, we want to implement the process. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Charrisse. Dr. Fleming, again, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your willingness to work with Charrisse and with us, Gardner Webb. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask at this time, or any input that you'd like to share with us?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity, and working with Charrisse has been an answer to a prayer. I was able to be very transparent with her to tell her what my needs were, and quite vulnerable. As a counselor, we get into the touchy-feely stuff, but when it comes to all this strategic planning, we don't want to do that. And so she was able to really meet me where I was. And as I hear what she has done, had an opportunity to see, she's kept me posted the entire time. But as I just hear her present today, I am absolutely thrilled about the opportunity that's coming my way, that I will have something in writing. I have, as she has described very nicely, a roadmap to do some of the things, because again, I have a lot of great intentions, but that product probably would not have happened the way it's going to happen had it not been for her research. So I want to say thank you. I'm absolutely elated right now. And this, I was sharing with a friend earlier, and this is my last comment. I'm on my way to a funeral for tomorrow in Atlanta, but I have had one good thing to look forward to today, and that was the dissertation defense that I'm listening to now. So bravo, phenomenal job in my opinion, and I actually have my roadmap. Thank you so much for doing this for me. And we were able to kill two birds with one stone. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Dr. Jones, I'll go to you for questions now.
Yeah, thank you. You've answered most of the questions that I had. I just want to clarify that that the advisory board is in place.
Yes.
Is that true? And
Yes.
those are the individuals that you surveyed.
Yes.
And then you followed up with qualitative questions.
Yes. Yeah,
how
so,
many of those?
so initially we started with, 11 as a sample, but one of the members passed away, so in my, quantitative data, I had 11 responses, but in my qualitative data, I had 10 responses. And so those were the folks, his, leadership board, his advisory board, those were the folks that, I actually, surveyed.
Okay, and they, are they meeting on a regular basis at this time?
To my knowledge, they are not meeting at this
He
time.
just has them on board.
Right, and I think one of the things, and how I got that picture is I got the opportunity because Dr. Fleming had invited me to the site location, and so what he had done was just have like kind of a grand opening because he had already, purchased the house and done some work, and so it was a way to kind of celebrate that, venture, but to my knowledge, no, they had not been.
Okay.
Where is the house located?
Monroe, North Carolina. And it's a bit, it's a nice little town and it's away from, so the whole idea of rest and renewal, is very tranquil. And so as a counselor, I thoroughly endorse the Dr. Fleming.
But I just want to just say that you did a really good job today tying together your lit review and your findings from your survey. That's kind of my thing is that, how did that work for you? And you also talked about some things that you learned that maybe surprised you a little bit. Was there anything either in your lit review or your findings that really surprised you that you didn't think you were gonna, because, strategic planning is such a, it's a buzzword. I mean, it's something we know we have to do, but did anything surprise you as you were looking into strategic planning as a roadmap for getting an organization off the ground and sustaining them through the long term?
Well, I did not think that there would be so many contrarian views on it, only because it's such a buzzword. It's something that people have used for a long time. I was surprised at the length of time that this debate had been going on. It's been going on for over 60 years in terms of, should we or shouldn't we? So I think the length of time was surprising, especially because there's so much data on the results if you do as well as if you don't.
Right.
So that was surprising for me.
I think you covered your theoretical framework very well, and that's always my question. I like the notion that the unfreezing is why we got to do this. The change is what we got to do, and then I like the monitoring piece. I'm always big into formative evaluation. How you know people are doing what you ask them to do, and that's the refreezing part, is that observation and evaluation. And you covered that real well in your slide sequence. I like that. That's the heart of Loomis change model. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn off our camera and mute us. Charrisse and your spouse, you can move out, and Dr. Jones and I will go into consultation. So you can stop your slideshow, and I will go to the stop video and
to call it a day. Your fingers on the phone. I can tell this on my phone, your hand.
Fans and love for people, it was a natural thing.
I did something different.
what's up, guys?
Same thing on.
Jason started using this here, my head and health home, and this is a must-have product. There was All right, Dr. Jones, you're back on. So welcome back, everybody. Congratulations, Charrisse. Yay.
So I appreciate that. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much. Then you did a great job.
Great job.
Congratulations. You guys were great as well, and I just wanted to provide a small token
Thank
of
you.
my appreciation.
Oh, you didn't have to do that. Thank you.
You know, that's the best part. That's
That's the best part.
Yeah, you didn't have to, but you wanted to.
Well, that's exactly right. That's what
Yeah.
we're talking about. You did a great job today. I have a couple questions for you that we
Okay.
always end up with, and I'll give you your charge. All right, so the first question I'm always compelled to ask is what was your favorite course in the sequence?
I know this is gonna be like tongue in cheek, but honestly, Dr. Lamb, it was your class.
Oh, no, you're not supposed to. I told you, you can't say mine.
Well, but the reason why, maybe when I explain the reason why, because I got the most value out of your class. It was something different. I'm a counselor, so we deal in feelings, and so what you told me was, no, we deal in, you seem like a nice person, Charrisse, but we deal in facts and not feelings here, right? And so for me, it was the class that I got the most value out of, that I had to work the hardest in.
Yeah. The statistics is never easy, and quantitative especially. But it's, you know, it's objective truth. It's just the facts, man.
Yeah.
As Sergeant Joe Friday would say. And then the charge, I guess, is please remember that you'd probably be the only Gardner Webb that people ever know or come in contact with. You got your red and black on today. And so you are a representative of us, and we ask that you, in all that you do, be true to your faith and be a servant leader for those around you. So I'm going to close today with our prayer of service. As you know, Gardner Webb's motto is Pro Deo et Humanitate, which in Latin means service for God and humanity. So if you'll pray with me, our prayer this morning, as always, comes from Saint Teresa of Avila, Sister Teresa. And the name of the prayer is, let me serve you. Lord, govern everything by our wisdom, O Lord, that my soul may always be serving you in the way that you will and not as I choose. Let me die to myself so that I may serve you. Let me live for you who are life itself. Amen. Congratulations, Dr. Charrisse.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I'll open up the floor for any of those who are on with us today for a closing comment for Charrisse.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. That will close.
Congratulations, cuz.
Congratulations, Charrisse. This is your line sister. I love you. You did a terrific job. Thank you for the invite.
Of course.
Charrisse, this is your other mother, and I'm so proud of you, and I love you very much, and much congratulations.
Thank you. Two mothers, that's awesome.
Charrisse, this is your cousin Tanya. Thank you for the invite. I
Thank
love
you,
you.
guys.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Charrisse.